Thank you all for having me. Welcome to Boston. By the way, your convention last year, I don't know if it was a full convention, but it was in Philly. You got this Philly guy to come to Boston somehow. I don't know how you pulled that off. But, well, I can tell you exactly why I'm here. And Brian, and by the way, Brian, thanks for your leadership. And I will tell you, your team that you have, and I truly mean this, because as Greg alluded to, we deal with an awful lot of people in DC covering an awful lot of issues. And there is no better team than the one that you have, particularly on the government relations side. So when, for many years, as you all are well aware, the postal reform bill was kicking around Congress. And Corey and her entire team, I got to tell you, they are like pit bulls. And they were not going to stop until this got done. And for so long, we were fighting for, and will continue to fight for, the financial security of our letter carriers. In fact, that was the precept of what the postal reform bill was about. Not just all the provisions, including 6-day delivery, but also getting rid of that horrendous, unjustified pre-funding mandate that was literally causing the insolvency of the Postal Service. We had colleagues on the House floor saying, well, why is the post office insolvent? And the answer was simple. It's because of Congress and a provision that applied to the post office and never applied to any other organization or entity in the government. They were being discriminated against. Well, now that's been fixed thanks to the work of your team. So when I met with Brian and with Corey in Philadelphia last summer, we asked, well, what now? We just got done this major, major victory for our letter carriers and our postal workers. And we talked about, and they educated me about this emerging threat, this emerging unfortunate trend of violence. Over the past 4 years, it's been over 2,000. And those are the documented cases. They're the ones we know about. And a 30% increase just over the past year. And you all have been through so much. Even on a good day, even in the best of times, you have a brutally tough job. You have to weather the elements. You have to deal with personalities at the door. You got to deal with traffic. You got to deal with it all. And you don't have a whole lot of margin for error because what's waiting on the other side are people that expect and need a lot of what you're bringing to them. And on a good day, it's a hard job. And then you got hit with COVID. And nobody was more on the front lines of COVID than our letter carriers and our frontline healthcare workers. And you all kept doing your job. You all kept doing your job. And now this additional threat comes. So while the Postal Reform Bill deals with financial security, the Protecting Our Letter Carriers Act deals with your physical safety and security. And you're entitled to both, by the way. And you also can't have one without the other. They're intertwined and interlinked. So when Brian and Corey identified this problem, we went back to DC, spoke to our legislative team. Claire Detner on our team partnered with your government relations personnel and crafted a bill. And I will tell you, we do an awful lot of press conferences in Washington, D.C. for an awful lot of bill rollouts. And I will say this, and this is being recorded, I will say this, there was no better bill rollout that I've seen in my 7 years in Congress than the Protecting Our Letter Carriers Act. And I'll tell you why. Number one, the bill was, there was a lot of work that got put into it, but every single union was there. It was amazing to see the camaraderie and the having each other's backs of all the unions, the flight attendants union, the AFGE, the building trades, everybody was there. Leadership from Congress was there. So that says a lot, because to get everybody behind one measure like that is significant. And it's already gotten across 100 co-sponsors, which is a good number. So how do we get it across the finish line? There's really two ways, well, there's three ways to do it. Number one, leadership can willingly put it on the floor. That's something we are working on and will continue to work on. Second is we can do what we call hitch a ride, meaning attach the language of this bill to some other must-move, must-pass piece of legislation, usually done at the end of the year. Or third, and this is a provision that my Bipartisan Problem Solvers Caucus, the group that I co-lead, was responsible for embedding into the rules package. So the rules package is the first bill you vote on in the beginning of every Congress. It essentially set the ground rules for how the House will operate, how it will function. And for several cycles now, our group of Democrats and Republicans stood arm in arm and said we are not going to support a rules package that does not include what's called the 290 rule. And what the 290 rule says is if we can get 290 co-sponsors on a bill, it puts it on something called the consensus calendar, meaning it circumvents House leadership and it forces a full floor vote. Now in the House, you only need 218 votes to pass a bill. So by definition, if you have 290 co-sponsors, it will pass. If we can, and the reason why I love this provision is it's a rank and file empowerment provision. You don't need the four corners, as we call them in DC, the Republican and Democrat leaders of the House and the Senate. This is a people power provision. So if we can get 290 co-sponsors on this bill, it forces it to the floor, and it will pass by definition because only 218 are needed. So my message to you today is for every single one of you, when you go back home, please, please, please speak to your representative. And if they won't meet with you in the district, go to DC. Most members, they should be required to do this. It's certainly the rule in our office. If a constituent is in Washington, you find time to meet them. And if they're in committee, you can meet them outside of their committee room. But they should be meeting with you. And you should have one ask for them, and that is this. Because just like the postal reform bill was priority number one for a long time, this is now priority number one for our letter carriers. And it should be for every member of Congress who cares about letter carriers. Because last I checked, your approval rating's a heck of a lot higher than ours. And for good reason. For good reason. And by the way, this should not be a heavy lift for any member. This is easy. Number one, we're supporting a wildly popular group. That would be you. And second, Greg walked through a few of the provisions, but let me explain to you, because not only am I a former FBI agent, I'm a former federal prosecutor, special assistant U.S. attorney. I've worked inside the U.S. attorney's offices, and I know how this stuff manifests itself. So as Greg pointed out, step number one is provide a funding boost to the USPS to allow the technology changes to occur to be a deterrent, so that there's less of an incentive for these crimes to ever happen in the first place, both dealing with the arrow keys, the collection boxes, and adding technology to make it less attractive, less likely that you would ever be a victim of this crime to begin with. And second, it does two things on the enforcement side. And by the way, enforcement also results in deterrence. That's the whole point of this. Enforcement piece number one is when you're in a U.S. attorney's office, just because something is illegal on the books doesn't mean, number one, it's going to be enforced on the FBI side or the OIG side for postal carriers. And letter carriers, or they do charge them, but they don't have enough prosecutors because of all the crimes that are being committed. They don't have enough prosecutorial resources to actually take these cases to trial, because that takes a lot of time. It's a resource drain on these U.S. attorneys' offices. So the second thing this bill does, but the first thing on the enforcement piece, is it designates an AUSA or a SALSA, Special Assistant U.S. Attorney, which is what I was at the U.S. Attorney's Office, to specifically handle these crimes. Why is that important? Because it no longer has to navigate its way to the top of the pile. It automatically will be put on top of the pile because it will go to a specified U.S. attorney, assistant U.S. attorney, to specifically charge these cases. So it will get prosecuted. And then lastly, in the federal system, there is something called the sentencing guidelines, and it's a grid, basically. It goes up and across. Goes up as in terms of offense level, whether or not you have prior offenses, the gravity of the offense, and then the horizontal piece is the dollar value of the crime. And then there's enhancements. So if you're in a position of public trust, you get a sentencing enhancement. If you commit a crime with a firearm, you get a sentencing enhancement. Well, this will add a sentencing enhancement for assaulting a letter carrier. That is very significant. So now that you're clear about what this bill does, and I reminded you of something you already know, which is you're wildly popular in America, my last ask of you is you go to your member of Congress. There is no reason why every All 435 members should not be on this bill. Zero. Unless they don't care about their letter carriers. And we know and we hope that that's not the case. So if you need help getting into what your local representative's office, let me or Greg, let our staffs know, and we will help navigate that for you. But there is no reason why we shouldn't get this done. And my goal is the next time we gather here, we're going to be celebrating that piece of legislation that is designed to keep you safe, because it's not just your financial security, it's your physical security that matters as well. And lastly, before I move on here, I want to thank you as a citizen of the United States for serving me, for serving my family. And I want to thank this organization for being truly committed to the cause. You have a Democrat and Republican coming to speak to you today. My friends, that's a sign of strength of this organization. And you don't ever want to lose that, because what it says is that this organization is committed to a cause, and that is protecting you and taking care of you. And that is incredibly important because, and nobody does this better than the labor movement, by the way. Brian had mentioned that I am with you across the board, including being the co-lead of the PRO Act, which will forever enshrine the right to organize, collective bargaining, prevailing wage, the whole 9 yards. As we've seen in American politics, the pendulum always has and always will swing back and forth. And you want to be on footing and in a position that no matter which way the pendulum may swing in any given year, that your rights are protected. And that is what your organization is doing. And that is so important, because we have an outcome determinative number of members in both parties that if anybody ever tries to strip your rights away via amendment or substantive bill, there are enough of us to kill that measure. And hopefully, we will gather enough strength that we can get the positive things like the PRO Act across the finish line to permanently enshrine that into law. But I wanted to say this to you because, as Greg talked about, we are both very, very big believers in bipartisanship. There are a number of caucuses in Congress that you're asked to join when you get there, but many are based on your philosophy, right? On the far right, you have the Freedom Caucus. On the far left, you have the Squad, and then as you inch in towards the center, one end to the right is the Republican Study Group, one end to the left is the New Dems, left of center, the Blue Dog Democrats, right of center, the Tuesday Group. And then there's one, and only one, that's bipartisan, and that's the Problem Solvers Caucus, and that's the one I lead. And we have a rule, it's a Noah's Ark rule, that if you want to join, you have to find someone from the opposite party to join with you. Every bill we advance is a two-party solution. It is bipartisan, like the Protect Our Letter Carriers Act, like the PRO Act. We sit together in the center of the chamber during the State of the Union address. We go to each other's districts, we call them district swaps, where we'll lend our area of expertise to our colleague from across the aisle, from a different party, imagine that. And we take the same approach to government that we take towards our personal relationships. That you don't allow the perfect to be the enemy of the good. You take the perspective that it's better to get 80% of something than 100% of nothing. You come to the center on that which you agree on, because on all these issues, not just this, but every issue, with very few exceptions, there's 75, 80, 80%, 85% agreement. So the question is, are we going to allow the 20, 25% areas of disagreement to stop all progress? Or are we going to figure out that which we agree on, get it across the finish line, and then tomorrow come back to what we couldn't agree on? This is what our group believes in. We believe in two-party solutions. We believe that no one party has a monopoly on good ideas. No one party has a monopoly on good human beings. People come to the table with different perspectives based on a whole host of different reasons. Where they grew up, the family they grew up in, pain they may have experienced in their life that you and I can't fathom. It all affects our paradigms and how we approach problems. We knew this as FBI agents. Every time we had a time-sensitive crime problem, we actively sought diversity around that table to point out our blind spots, which we all have. Our caucus, the Problem Solvers, is essentially the legislative version of that. And we are proud, very proud, to stand behind you and the Protect Our Letter Carriers Act. And please go home and ask your representative one thing. Do you stand with your letter carriers? We take care of you every single day. Can you do us this one favor? It's an easy ask. This legislation is not a hard lift. And if you're having a hard time, our staff will be there to help you get this across the finish line. God bless you. Thank you for what you do for my family and everybody in this country. God bless you.
All right. How about a really loud letter carrier cheer for Congressman Brian Fitzpatrick? Hip, hip. Hooray! Hip, hip. Hooray! Hip, hip.